This is Paul Schneiderman today on the 113th edition of the Sports Untold podcast, also on Rainier Avenue Radio. My special guest is former University of Washington football legend, a member of the University of Washington Athletic Hall of Fame, Jimmy Rodgers. I believe you were inducted in 2016, right, Jimmy?
That is correct. And thanks for having me on your show, Paul.
Absolutely, Jimmy. I'm going to get back to you in a minute. My podcast, Sports Untold, is now also on Spotify, on YouTube, Amazon, Google, iTunes, Podbean. And you can go to sportsuntoldpodcast.com. I don't believe we're going to be on Facebook Live today, but we will get this YouTubed and get it up, and there'll be a recording of this as well. Back to you, Jimmy. Jimmy Rodgers is an Oregon native. As I mentioned, he's a University of Washington Husky football legend, a member of the coveted University of Washington Athletic Hall of Fame. Jimmy worked in the financial world for many years, and he lived abroad in several different countries. Jimmy was very involved in launching the the Coach James statue right outside of Husky Stadium. And I have a little funny story I want to tell you about that at some point in the podcast, Jimmy. Jimmy is now host of the Downtown Dawgs show. I don't know if it's a podcast. It's more of a YouTube show, but it's a terrific one. And I recommend Jimmy's show. And Jimmy has chats with many Husky legends, including the academic advisor or retired academic advisor, Gertrude Peoples. Jimmy does a really good job capturing the thoughts of many people in the Husky athletic nation community. Jimmy was part of the great Purple Rain defensive team in the 1980s, a team that won the Orange Bowl. We're going to definitely talk about that. Well, Jimmy, thank you for coming on Sports Untold, also on Rainier Avenue Radio.
Certainly, Paul. And congratulations on your interview with Steve Ballard the other day. I watched that, and you had to slug your way through it because he's really boring. I mean, a lot of material there, but just a boring guy. Like,
I'm going to politely take issue with you. I find Steve to be a real cerebral, interesting, kind, reflective guy. I actually thought he had a lot of interesting things to say. So I'm going to challenge you on that, Mr. Rodgers.
I love Steve very much, and I'm just having fun.
I get it. I had to have a quick snarky response though, Jimmy. So. Jimmy, you played college football at UW, you had a prominent career at the University of Washington, and you worked for many years in the financial world. As I mentioned, you worked in several different countries. Was this the anticipated path you had growing up, Jimmy, that you would play college football and then work in the financial world for many decades?
Absolutely not. Out of Ashland, Oregon, small town, predominantly played soccer and baseball. And at some point, I think seventh grade, we started playing tackle football, where you had to put the pads on and figure out where the pads go in the pants and such. And it wasn't fun. It hurt. And then I realized if you hit the other guy more than he hit you, it didn't hurt as much. So football was probably my third sport. So soccer was my number one sport. Played for the USA select team, goalkeeper. And so as a 13, 14, 15-year-old, I toured Europe as the goalkeeper, and then Mexico, and got the hell beat out of us just about every place we went, by the way. But I kind of got the travel bug at that point in my life, I believe.
Interesting. So football was kind of your third sport, and you ended up becoming a college Hall of Fame football player. That's interesting.
Correct.
Yeah. I want to talk to you more about your soccer career, Jimmy, in a few minutes, but I want to talk to you now about that Washington Orange Bowl team. And I'm a little younger than you. I remember that game real well. As I think I was about a 14-year-old kid then. It was an incredible game. And Washington finished number 2 in the country officially after that 85 Orange Bowl game. And I never forget the Sooner Schooner with that famous penalty. And you were part of that game and that team. Jimmy, there was talk about Washington playing BYU in the Holiday Bowl. And had you guys played BYU in the Holiday Bowl and won that game, you guys probably would have been the undisputed national champions. As amazing as that Orange Bowl experience was, Jimmy, is there a side of you that kind of wishes you guys played BYU in the Holiday Bowl?
For starters, I checked with Mike Lude on that fact recently, and he said that was not on the table. That was nothing more than a rumor that we're going to play BYU. But if in fact we did play BYU, I think our JV team could have beat them that year. So BYU didn't play anybody in the top 25 that year. And I think they went undefeated for 2 years in a row. And then Carol James finally spilled the beans that the final vote, it was a tie going into, 2 a.m. in the morning. We were back in Miami, obviously. And the tiebreaker came down to the Washington State coach, Jim Walden. And he had allegiance, that was his quote, towards Lavelle. What was the name of the coach for BYU? Lavelle?
I know who you're talking about. I forgot his last name. Yeah.
He had an allegiance towards the BYU coach, and the final vote went to BYU.
I never knew that, because when I was doing a little pre-show research the other day, the way it was written on the internet, it was made out as a fact that Washington was offered the Holiday Bowl opportunity against BYU. You're telling me Mike Lewin knows more than I do, so that was not the case. And I did not know the story that the Washington State coach was like the deciding vote and why BYU was number one that year and not Washington.
Carol James finally spilled the beans about the vote, but hats off to Mike Lewin, because he had the hindsight to. He had the Orange Bowl representatives at the Apple Cup when we played up in Pullman, that final game. So those guys were on the field in their Orange Bowl blazers, and he convinced them how lovely it was in December up there and what nice weather they would have. And they came to the game, and it was funny because they were most impressed with their offense. And they said, boy, this Washington team has a great offense. And so they chose us to be in the Orange Bowl. And as you know, it was predominantly a defensive team, except for the Michigan game and the Washington State game and the Orange Bowl game.
Let me go back to the original question, though. Let's just say hypothetically Washington had a chance to play BYU in the Holiday Bowl that year. You're still glad you played in the Orange Bowl.
Crushed them. We would have crushed them. And I know you didn't ask me that question, but I couldn't wait to tell you that we would have crushed BYU. As a player, you just do the best you can. We can go back and look at the polls were different back then. They had the BTN. We had the same votes that I think of the 1960 team that was, we acclaimed a national championship team for the University of Washington. We had the same #1 votes that they did. So there's like 5 different polls, but we got #2, and I got no problem with that. I mean, I can't tell you, Paul, how many people will say, now, which game did you play in? And once you say Orange Bowl, they know Sooner Schooner. It's the first thing they say. Then they go to Bosworth, and then they go to Barry Switzer. And if it's a Rose Bowl, they go, which Rose Bowl game? And they get a little, because there are 3 or 4, they get a little confused on which Rose Bowl game. But I'll be the first one to say I'm proud to be #2.
Yeah, and you, like you said, I think you guys sort of we would have beat BYU that year. I mean, BYU was beat a 6-5 Michigan team by 1 touchdown in the Holiday Bowl that year. I mean,
we ruined Michigan's season that year. We played them our 2nd or 3rd game at Michigan with Harbaugh at quarterback. And Jim and I had a talk a couple months ago. He was going to come on the show, but we beat the score against Michigan did not resemble the game itself. We beat them hands down at Michigan. And from that point on, they went downhill. So they had just come off a victory. They just beat #1 Miami with Bernie Kosar. And I think they were rated #2 or something in the nation. And we beat the heck out of them. We jumped them from the get-go like we did most teams.
That's an interesting story about the Washington connection to Michigan that year as well. This is Paul Schneiderman, host of the Sports Untold podcast, also on Rainier Avenue Radio. I encourage my people to like my podcast and subscribe and offer comments. I'm with Jimmy Rodgers, host of the great Downtown Dawgs show / podcast. Hey, Jimmy, back to you for a minute in the Orange Bowl game. Did you actually play with a broken arm in that Orange Bowl game?
I played with a broken arm my entire senior year. I had three separate breaks throughout the final 2 years. And my whole life was sports, whether it was soccer, baseball, football. Every day when you're in Ashland, Oregon, you lived to play sports. So every day of my life, I was playing a sport. And then all of a sudden you get to the University of Washington and you've got a hairline fracture that turns into a really nasty break. And then you realize you're like, oh my God, I've got 12 games and I've got a broken, and it's over if you don't play. So we casted it up. I played with the broken arm. We put 6 pins in there with a plate. It broke again the first time I practiced after putting the plate and screws in there. And the irony of the Orange Bowl was I had this heavy cast on, if you can see me, that came right up to here on my thumb.
Right.
And we taped it on. The referees checked it before every game. And I did use it as a weapon as much as possible. Let's just get that out in the open.
Yeah.
there was a play where Danny Bradley tried to leap over me to get into the end zone, and he caught my thumb on his cleat, and my thumb went against the cast. I broke my thumb in the Orange Bowl. So I was with a broken arm and then a broken thumb, I think it was in the second quarter. And yeah, it was, and that's something to speak to, Paul, because, you look at a guy like Dave Hoffman, I believe his junior year, he was Defensive Player of the Year in the Pac-10. I think it was the Pac-10 at that point. And for a guy like that not to be all pro in the NFL, for somebody to be a Defensive Player of the Year in the Pac-10, that's an automatic NFL career. But he was so beat up by the time his senior year came along. So the guy's on crutches Monday through Friday and playing Saturday. And I can't tell you, there are so many Huskies that you're not aware of, including myself, that were on crutches Monday through Friday. For me, it was the USC game, no practice, tape it up, play against USC down there. It was the Apple Cup, you get a scope surgery and do the same thing in the Orange Bowl. So the NFL career was out the window. And I can tell you this, after being on the field, whether it was with the Seahawks or the Chargers, whoever, absolutely. If you can start for the Huskies, if you can start in the Pac-10, you can play in the NFL.
Jimmy, you brought up a lot there, and I was going to ask you about your NFL career prospects, but a lot of what limited you getting the NFL were these injuries, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because you had a great college career. And I want to share this with you, Jimmy, and I'm going to add to this list. And one thing that I'm finding inspirational about my podcast are people who've overcome different challenges. And your broken arm and broken thumb is another amazing challenge that you overcame. For example, I had the famous pitcher on Jim Abbott who pitched with one hand. I had Bill North, the famous baseballer, who played with blind in one eye, legally blind like in one eye. So I'm going to add you to the list of people who overcame some major obstacles. I mean, gosh, it's hard enough to be a defensive back, but playing with a broken thumb and a broken arm, it's incredible. So,
well, to a true warrior, it brings out the best of a true warrior in the face of adversity. It really does. And I don't know where it comes from. You either have it or you don't have it. And so when you're really faced with adversity, something just clicks. And you go into this mode that I cannot explain. And the real talent is that you turn it on when you're on the field. But
we'll call it the Rodgers zone, right?
We'll call it the Rodgers zone, but I can tell you there's so many guys that have that, and it's just unexplainable. And the real talent is to turn it off when you leave the field. Okay, so I believe, for example, downtown Seattle, part of the reason I did the Downtown Dawgs was I was getting so fed up with the BS that was going on down here, whether it was the robberies or just the lack of respect for our city, because I really enjoyed seeing other teams come into town, whether the Yankees or the 49ers or the Toronto Blue Jays. And I can look right out my window and I can see them wearing their colors. And suddenly they have to walk around so-and-so's tent who's got a miniature barbecue going. So, you get to that point, and I was like so frustrated. That switch came on, and I said, let's do something positive. Let's do something positive. Let's have the Downtown Dawgs, and let's start sharing some stories about some great people, my heroes. And I was going to do 6 episodes. Jock Robinson, Kurt Marsh, Mike Lude, Gertrude Peoples, and then all of a sudden I got Tom Flick, I got Warren Moon, I got our mayor, Bruce Harrell, came on the show, Chuck Armstrong. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And I've got, there's 50 more waiting. And I'm currently not doing the show right now, but it was just time to do something very positive and to shine a positive light on Seattle. And what's happened recently since Bruce became mayor January 3rd, it's had a tremendous turnaround downtown. I cannot tell you how much different it is to walk downtown right now, to go to the market. The riffraff, we still have a huge homelessness problem. We've got a lot of work to do. We need to get the drug addicted people. We need to get them treatment. We need to get homes for the homeless. But the jack-offs that are selling drugs, that are taking advantage of the situation, they're gone. they are absolutely gone. And Goldman Sachs, as a matter of fact, there's a new building, one of the most beautiful architectural buildings in the Northwest called the Residence Tower, right next to the Rainier Tower. Goldman Sachs bought the top floor. So Goldman Sachs came out and basically said in Wall Street terms, Seattle is a strong buy. We've got the right mayor here, and we've got, I mean, look around. Seattle, have you been down to the waterfront lately?
Yeah. Oh, yes. I used to work downtown for over 20 years. So
Oh.
I live in Leshigh now, but I still consider myself a downtown guy. And I'm going to talk to you more about your podcast, Jimmy, but
Okay.
I love how you're embracing downtown, the downtown neighborhood as part of your podcast.
Absolutely.
And I think that adds the uniqueness of your podcast. So I love it how you're embracing downtown. And I think there's over 75,000 people who live downtown as a neighborhood too.
Yeah.
So,
And as a matter of fact, we started the show right when the pandemic broke out. So to get somebody to drive downtown, to come on the show, pandemic, mask up, I think we were wearing gloves at that point. You know, these are true Seattle heroes, in my opinion, whether it's the Spady family or, like I said, Warren Moon or Tom Flick or, you know, Anthony Allen. My gosh. You
great
know.
guest. Love to get a couple of those guys on my show for sure. Yeah, love it. Hey, Jimmy, I'm going to talk to you more about your podcast. So much stuff today. And if I hopefully have you back one day, we can have more subjects. I'm not going to take up your whole day because I could talk to you all day, but I would not do that to you. But do you think, I'm going to put you on the spot with this question. Do you think that 84, 85 Washington Orange Bowl team could have beaten the 90-91 Washington or 91-92 that Washington National Championship team? Do you think your team, that team was as good or close to being as good as a national championship team?
I think the real question is how do the defenses compare? Because our offense really struggled. They came through in some very key games. And Paul, I was never one to look at stats. I mean, when that game was over, that first or second or third game, all I focused on was the following week. The only time that we celebrated was at the end of the Orange Bowl. And point being, I saw a statistic when we were doing a photo shoot, photo op at the Orange Bowl, and it compared, I think Oklahoma's defense might've been number 2, and we had the number 1 defense in the country. And I saw a statistic, and I haven't been able to find this since, minutes played. So our defense, the original Purple Rain, by the way, and I wish I would have coined it back then, but our defense played twice as many minutes as the number 2 defense in the country.
I didn't know that. Wow.
So you think about that. That's 2 seasons in 3 months. Okay. Now, yes, our offense came through big time against Michigan at the Apple Cup, thank God, and then the Orange Bowl, of course. But Oregon, 1 first down. We're number 1 in the country, and we got 1 first down against Oregon. We got 3 first downs at Oregon State, who won 1 game in 2 years, I believe. So I think our defense arguably was better, but we'll never know because, you know, by the end of the season, we were hanging by a thread physically. Our defense was. Ronnie Holmes had a knee. Meamber had a knee. Joe Krakowski blew out a knee. So we didn't really have much depth going into that game. And that brings up the next topic of playoffs. Anybody that wants to have 4, and I heard you talk to Steve about it. You want to have a 4-team playoff, an 8-team playoff, a 16. That's great for us to watch, right? We don't want the season to be over, but I guarantee you the people that are deciding on playoffs never played a down of football.
Right.
There's no way in hell you should play more than 11 or 12 games.
Right. Especially these are teenagers. A lot of them are kids in their early 20s, you know,
Exactly.
so I get that.
So
I
get
get
back
that.
to the vote and so be it. But of course, there's big money too, right?
And I know sometimes as a sports fan, we'll throw out these hypotheticals about with the 1927 Yankees, how would they have done against the 98 Yankees, you know? So I'm having fun with that Washington Orange Bowl team question versus that Washington National Championship team question. But I'll tell you, you were on a heck of a team. And as a fan, I think you guys were pretty close to being as good or maybe even a little better than 91 National Championship team. I don't know. It's hard to measure it, but you were on a heck of a team. So.
It would have been fun to have some of those guys on our team.
Right.
That would have been something else.
Ron Holmes, yourself, Hugh Millen, Pattison, the list goes on. It was a great team. Paul Schneider, again, host of the Sports Untold podcast, also on Rainier Avenue Radio with University of Washington, great Jimmy Rodgers. I encourage people to like and comment and go to sportsuntoldpodcast.com. I encourage people to listen to Jimmy's and watch Jimmy's show, Downtown Dawgs. Jimmy, you were very involved, and Steve Pallure mentioned this to me when he was on my show back in December. and getting that Don James incredible statue built and launched. I want you to share with me and the listeners and what galvanized you to play such a role in getting the Don James statue out. And I have a second question for you. There's two statutes outside of Husky Stadium right now: Jim Owens, Coach Owens, and Coach Don James, two of our deceased famous coaches. Would you support putting up a third statue? And who should the third person be?
Mike Lode.
Great answer. Great answer.
Hands down.
And what galvanized you to get play such a role and get a Don James statue going?
Well, I just finished up with my hedge fund in Wall Street due to that 2008 housing debacle. Went back to Oregon to walk my mother out, got a phone call from a dear teammate and said, we should build a statue of Don James before he becomes obsolete. And a lot of the younger kids were saying, who's Don James? And I said, absolutely. So I moved into a teammate's house in Seattle, dialed for dollars every day, made the proposal to the University of Washington. And the key to the proposal, Paul, was we wanted the players to pay for it. And the reason we wanted the players to pay for it is because we didn't want it to be the Nordstrom Don James statue. And I love the Nordstrom family. Classic.
Likewise, yeah.
I think the world of them. We didn't want it to be the Ron Crockett. And I feel the same way about Ron. But we didn't want it to be the Ron Crockett Don James. We just wanted it to be the Don James statue. So the best way to go about that was to pay for it ourselves. So proposed it to the University of Washington. Jen Cohn loved it, gave us the green light. And it was really a complicated fundraiser. It was only $150,000. And keep in mind, with my hedge fund, the minimum was $500,000.
Wow.
I thought 150 grand, maybe 1 month.
Right.
I think it took about a year. And it was really interesting to see a lot of people had reasons not to put money in. And so we kept it with the players. I think we opened it up towards the end to finish it up, to get the rest of the money. But I think a lot of players felt like they left it on the field. You're asking us to give money to this big, very rich institution.
Right.
Maybe some players weren't fans of Don James. There were a lot of issues out there, and it was extremely complicated. And I didn't really, I think the best way to explain the whole thing, in church the other day, Father Madigan said, institutions are going to use you. And don't take use you as a negative. It's a fact. Institutions use people. They don't have a heartbeat, okay? And the key is to use the institution back. So I guarantee you, if you and I didn't go to the same institution, we wouldn't be sitting here having this nice conversation. You might not be the successful lawyer that you are today.
Trying to be.
So the connections that you make, the friends you make from going to the University of Washington, you need to take advantage of that.
No doubt.
So that's really, it was interesting, It was an interesting, but then again, every time I see the statue or I see people taking pictures of it before the game with it, I should say, I have a very proud moment.
Jimmy, it's a wonderful statue, and I salute the role that you and so many others played in getting that statue developed. I loved your answer that right away you said Mike Lode should be the subject of a third statue, University of Washington. Great name. And I think that'd be an interesting idea. And I don't think there's too many athletic directors that have statutes at their respective universities. It'd be really cool to have Lode honored. Now I got a little fun story to tell you, Jimmy.
Okay.
So it involves the Don James statue. So I went to the Husky spring game last year, May of 2021. And for fun, I took a picture of myself outside that same Don James statue, similar picture that you submitted to me that I'm using for the show announcement. And I wrote a little Facebook post. You got a couple of laughs. I was trying to be light. I wrote, you think about that great Ben Stiller movie, Night at the Museum. I wrote where statues of famous people come to life and talk. Right now, Don James is saying, Paul, he will not be my quarterback this year. So, anyhow.
He had that look.
He did.
He had that look, and it was interesting because how tall was he, Paul? What would you say? 5? How tall was
Well, you knew Don. I only met Don James a couple of times. You obviously knew him better than I did. So
he's not very tall.
Right.
But he had all 160 guys scared to death.
I've heard that. I've heard stories.
Intimidated by until you were done playing. And then when you were done playing, it was like, oh my God, he's like a friend, right? And I'll never forget. I was like, I think it was in the mid 90s. I think Lambright was the head coach. And Dave Stransky and I were going to a golf tournament on behalf of Coach Lambright. And I don't know if you remember Dave Stransky from Cedro Willie. And Don James came walking out of the clubhouse. And as we passed each other, Don said to Dave, Don said something to Dave about, he called him a broken down receiver or something of that nature, kind of made fun of him.
Right.
And Dave said, well, you're just an old fart.
That's funny.
And I thought I could never say that. And they both laughed. I guess going back and forth for quite some time.
Don James didn't strike me as like a joke around kind of guy, really.
No, not at all. And when he came to my high school and he came into the PE room and the coach called me in and said, Don James is here to talk to you. I had teeth that were all over the track, so I never smiled. I really focused on keeping my mouth shut. And Don wasn't for small talk. And it was kind of like this, Paul. This is how the conversation went.
A lot of silence.
Nice meeting you. And that was it. But I knew I wanted a guy. I didn't need anybody to inspire me to play. I wanted to play. I wanted a guy that was going to keep us organized. I wanted a guy that was going to keep everybody between the lines. And that was Don James. And he was going to get the best out of everybody. But and then if I'm extrapolating a bit, but as far as what school to go to, Seattle versus Eugene or Pullman or Corvallis. Now, maybe USC, maybe LA, right? Depends on what you're looking for. But Seattle again, can we come back?
You're looking for a Pac-12 or Pac-10 then urban environment. That's what you were looking for.
Pac-8, the Pac-10, the Pac-12, that was the place to play back then. They probably had more active NFL ball players. I'm sure they have quite a few today also. We're obviously taking our lumps, which we can talk about later. But to play in the Pac-10, if you're a West Coast guy, if you're a kid from Ashland, Oregon, that meant everything in the world.
Big deal. It'll be a big deal again, I think.
Yeah.
Jimmy, I want to ask you a Husky Hall of Fame question. You had a wonderful honor of being inducted back in 2016. I was at the 2012 induction. My good friend, tennis player Chet Corral, got in 2012, and I was there watching Chet get honored. And I want to ask you, who's someone who's not in the Husky Athletic Hall of Fame you think should be in? And do you think Chris Peterson should be in based on his 6 years as the coach and his work now in the UW business department and so forth? So 2 questions for you. Who should be in that's not in? And what do you think of Chris Peterson's prospects?
Steve Balleur should have been put in some time ago. A little upset that he's not in. Offensive player of the year in the Pac-10.
Did Steve eventually get in?
No, he's in the Ring of Honor, I think.
Okay.
The third quarter where they introduce you during the game.
Oh, I didn't know Steve Balleur is not in.
Yeah,
that surprises me.
I don't know Peterson that well, but I wouldn't vote him in personally.
Not at this point. Okay.
I don't know at any point. I mean,
okay.
What do you do? He got fourth. He got number 4.
6-year run. 6 years as a U.S. Senate term.
Okay.
So, all right. Well, everyone's got their opinion.
What does he do now for the UW?
Well, I think he's involved in the business school, and I think he's like an at-large advisor in the athletic department. But he took the team to the Final Four, got a Rose Bowl appearance. I mean, 6-year run. I know it wasn't like as long as Don James's run, but anyhow, we can respectfully see it differently.
Sure, absolutely.
But I'm really surprised Steve Balleur is not in. That really surprises me.
Yeah, that's unexplainable.
Yeah, I don't get that.
And they do want to keep it down to individuals. It's not cheap, I guess, to put people in the Hall of Fame. So versus teams, that's why it was such a big deal for our team to get in.
Right.
Being an individual.
But Steve Balleur, he's one of the best Husky quarterbacks in history.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a huge omission. I mean, you hear about great athletes not in their respective Hall of Fames. I mean, Balleur, not the UW Hall of Fame. I'm getting fired up on that, Jimmy.
Yeah, you should.
So, yeah. Such a classy guy too. Hey, Jimmy, I read something interesting about you. So you've had a really interesting biography, really interesting life and career. And if I get you back one day, we can talk more about all your experiences. But I want you to share with the listeners when you coached soccer in Cape Town, South Africa. It seemed like that was a pretty amazing experience for you.
Yeah, it was a life changer for me. So how I got to South Africa is a whole nother story, but I was very depressed, and I was weighing about 290 some pounds,
Wow.
and just trying to figure things out. My business, I don't think my business, yeah, I think my hedge fund was done, and trying to figure out the next move. Because when you go from coming out of that tunnel, and there's no bigger high, you can't, there's no better high than that in the world. And then I was introduced to Wall Street, and the same gentleman that recruited me for the Huskies, Alan Stover, he had departed a few years before I graduated, became a stockbroker, which is what we were called. It's the same test. They're investment advisors or whatever, wealth management, I don't know. And he hired me at Dane Bosworth. And boy, that really turned me on. I loved Wall Street. I loved the 6:30 opening on the nose, closed at 1 o'clock. It was pretty exciting for me. And I graduated all the way up from an investment advisor to a managerial position to having my own hedge fund when the internet came out, and just got my ass kicked in the 2008 market. So
Many people did.
Yeah, many people did. But anyhow, we'll talk about that sometime. It's followed me a bit, the fact that I lost money. South Africa. So I'd be sitting on the Indian Ocean having a coffee, and these same kids from Malawi would come up to me every day and try to sell me some knockoff Gucci glasses or a handmade chessboard, that's this big, and a table. And we got to know each other's names. Their names are very Chikuzi, innocent, more love. The names go on and on. All of them were named by their grandparents because their mothers had all passed away from AIDS for the most part, and they didn't know their fathers at all. So it was that time in our culture where these kids were coming from Malawi, thousands of miles away, to sell their goods to a richer part of Africa. Cape Town is a very wealthy part of South Africa. Camps Bay, which is even more, a lot of BMWs. It wasn't like I was in the bush. I wasn't in the safari. So every day these kids would come up to me, and I got a little irritated the third or fourth day because it was the same item. And I just wanted to have my coffee, and I'm trying to figure life out. And they'd say, James, do you want to, buy this chessboard? And I finally looked over and I said, innocent, what the hell am I going to do with it? Can I take it on the plane? What do you want me to, and they said, well, James, why are you here? And I said, well, I just want to chill the F out. Okay. And I thought that would get rid of them. And they both looked at me and they said, James, do you mind if we chill the F out with you? And I thought, okay, these guys, they're smart. They were very well read, even though they were homeless. They didn't have the technology. Therefore, they had books versus laptops and Kindles and iPhones and such. So I said to them, I was getting ready to take the, I believe it was called the Blue Train, which was similar to the Orient Express in South Africa. And I really liked trains. And this was like a 5-star train. And I had one more month left until I had to come back to the US to get my visa stamped. And I said, and I know these kids love soccer, and I've got a soccer background. And just to give you an idea, Paul, every onlet to a highway or an off-ramp where there's a little bit of grass, if there's grass, there's soccer being played in South Africa, everywhere you go. So I said, I said, do you guys like to play soccer? And I was acting a little naive, and I saw their eyes light up and said, absolutely. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, why don't we see how many kids want to play soccer at such and such a field tomorrow morning at 8:30. And I had purchased a 10-speed while I was there. So I was riding my bike everywhere, and I was losing weight, and I was getting my act together. And I rode up to this field, and Paul, there were about 16 kids. It was 15 minutes before practice was supposed to start. There were like 15 kids in their boxers and barefoot conditioning. And I said, holy smokes, we got something here. So I started training these kids every day. I eventually bought them cleats, and then they accepted me because of this.
Wonderful.
Then we ended up getting uniforms, and I got the names on the back, as you can see, the video that you probably took a look at. And then we challenged the local rich club, Rich White Club. And we had a big game, and we scored the first goal. And, you know, it's a 90-minute match.
Right.
There's like 88 minutes to go. And the field was just swarmed with the homeless people of Cape Town and Camps Bay. It was, and I'm like, get off the field. We got 88 minutes to go. And these guys were so happy. It was just it was a life-altering movement. And I went straight from that game. I had my taxi ready straight to the airport, and that's it. And
What a great story. It has a little Hollywood aspect to it. And you know, another part of your life, Jimmy, that I think something else you've overcome is I know that weight.
If you don't mind, well, we raised like 200 South African rand.
Yeah.
And of course, the kids had already spent it on, you know, sneakers or whatever.
Right.
And I said, how about, because they didn't like these kids. The Cape Town and the Camps Bay people did not like the kids being there from Malawi. Okay?
Right.
I said, how about we donate that money to the local church? And they donated the 200 rand to the local church, and the kids were accepted.
It's a great, Jimmy, it has a Hollywood story to it. It's an incredible story. And something else I was mentioning, Jimmy, another part of your life that you've overcome is I know that weight issues can be very hard. And, you know, being 290 pounds and slimming way down, that must have been another challenge in your life you overcame. Because I know people who've struggled with weight issues. Those are very difficult issues.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
you get done playing and you get done working out every day of your life. And then you go through, you take your hits, whether it's your father passing away, which wasn't my situation, your mother passing away, the hedge fund. You know, everybody takes their hits in life. And my theory is the sooner you take it, the better. It gives you more time to make up, to catch up. But to me, self-medicating and lack of self-awareness equals self-imprisonment. So I thought I was all that, right? Husky guy, orange bowl cap.
right.
And then saw myself in a reflection in a window, and I said, "What the hell happened to me?" And I was blessed with a good nucleus to work with physically, and then we lost a teammate, Rod Jones.
He's a great guy. I met Rod several times. Wonderful guy. I went to his service.
Okay, and Rod and I had multiple conversations before he took his life, and he couldn't get his hands around alcohol.
It was so sad.
So when Rod took his life, and I said, there's a good chance we all have a little something CTE, because we led with our heads all those years, and it was it was much more violent then than it is now. There's a good chance something's going on up there. And if you want to throw alcohol in the mix, not good, right? It's like throwing gasoline on a fire. So I stopped self-medicating when it was probably the day of Rod's celebration, December 17th, like 3 years ago, I think.
I went to the reception or the service, the athletic department. It was very sad, and he was a nice man. And thank you for sharing a little bit about your friend, the late Rod Jones.
Sure.
Well, Jimmy, what you do with those young people in Africa is just an amazing story, and it really reflects a lot of the good things about you. There's a great Yiddish word for a nice person, a mensch. What you did was a mensch-like act, helping those kids. So that's a great story. Jimmy, I asked these. I'm going to transition here for a minute, and I asked these two questions to pretty much all my guests since late 2019. I just love these two questions. I love the two answers I get. We can call it the Paul Schneiderman questions, but whatever. Who's a living sports figure you'd love to chat with? It can be a retired sports figure, a general manager, an owner, a player, someone who's still with us, someone who survives, and who's a deceased sports figure in history you would have loved to have interviewed or had a conversation with.
We've kind of touched base on both of them, so I got to talk to every one of them. So from Tom Flick being number one to to Warren Moon, to Sonny Six Killer, to Bruce Harrell, to Kurt Marsh. I mean, Kurt Marsh is just a beautiful person. I implore you to have him on your show sometime.
Love to.
I'm sure he will come on it. So I got to talk to all these people that are alive. As far as anybody, the only one I haven't been able to talk to, who was my childhood hero, was Willie Mays, the Say Hey Kid. And it was all about, I mean, he was a great baseball player, but it was his attitude. I mean, our generation, or the next generation, I don't think they understand what the Say Hey Kid means. The Say Hey Kid means I get to play baseball. You know, I get to play a sport for a living. Let's go. Let's have some fun. You know, we get to wake up and live today. Say Hey Willie Mays. That's my guy. I used to love
it.
I used to love Pete Rose, but it was his style of play. I loved his hustle, Charlie Hustle, but he turned out to be a jerk. So I don't really care to meet Pete Rose. But I loved his style of play. I mean, it came down to a few baseball games where you have to ask yourself, would you rather hit a home run or take the catcher out at home plate? Now, it depends on the catcher, it depends on the score, but a lot of times I'd rather take the catcher out. And that's when I decided to play football versus baseball. So those would be the two. Jack Tatum, I've always been intrigued by, but I don't know anything about him as a person. But
I think he did pass Jack Tatum.
Did pass, yeah. But his style of play was, you know, really compelling to me.
Willie Mays' name has come up, and I'll tell you something, Jimmy, we have something in common. He may be about the number one living sports figure I'd love to chat with would be Willie Mays. Sandy Koufax would be up there too, but Willie Mays would be about number one for me, and his name has come up. And I love the Jack Tatum answer. And I remember reading his book, They Call Me Assassin, the Jack Tatum book. So
that was our Bible as a defensive back.
Yeah.
That was our Bible. And one other one, Reggie Rodgers. I would love to sit down with Reggie and Rod. And recently we lost Walt Hunt, Freddie Small, Roger Tarver. We've lost a lot of teammates. And you know what? When you don't see them for a long time, Paul, and they pass, it's kind of surreal. But I had a good moment with Reggie before he passed. They were honoring, I was in Beverly Hills, cheesy, you know, 90210, whatever. And they were honoring Don Rodgers at UCLA. And Reggie and I got together, and they just were able to put the Orange Bowl video on a CD.
Oh, fun. Oh, fun.
Or DVD. So we sat there and I got a big screen, and we had the best time watching the Orange Bowl game together. And so that's how I get to remember Reggie. But if you ask, and one of the questions I asked all my guests is, who was the funniest teammate? Reggie Rodgers. Reggie Rodgers.
Yeah. We'll let him rest in peace. And Fred Small. And thank you for sharing much of those guys. I love your Willie Mays answer. And Jack Tatum, it's the first time a guest has mentioned Jack Tatum as a sports figure they would have loved to have chatted with. So thank you for contributing to that, those questions. Paul Schneider, again, a host of Sports Untold, also on Rainier Avenue Radio with UW football legend Jimmy Rodgers. I encourage my listeners to subscribe and like and go to sportsuntoldpodcast.com. And also I will continue to recommend that people take a look at Jimmy's show, the Downtown Dawgs show on YouTube. Jimmy, you got time for a few more questions?
All the time in the world, Paul.
Great. Where'd you come out on these University of Washington basketball players, Terrell Brown and Dejan Davis, getting paid to do some interviews on KJR? What's your take on these college athletes getting paid now for like name, image, likeness type activities?
NILs, I don't really have much to say to that. I think, you know, the market is what it is. I think when a coach loses, and one of my dear friends, Jimmy Moore Jr., when he had a losing season at UCLA, he got fired, and he got, 11, 12 million to get fired. I think that's where the problem started. So as far as players getting paid, absolutely. Coaches can leave anytime they want. They can get fired and make 12 million. So it's the market, and it is what it is. I don't know how it's going to shake out. I don't, you know, I have no idea if it's going to hurt the sport. I can't imagine it being good for the sport, but yet I haven't heard about too many players that have transferred that have made a huge difference, unless maybe it's a quarterback or maybe a 5-star wide receiver. But you know,
that's an interesting point. A couple points are up there, and your point about how well these kids do when they transfer. Terrell Brown may be an exception to that. He's having a heck of a year of the UW basketball team. I think that
Sure.
transfer to UW worked out for him. That's an interesting point, that how well do these transfers really work for a lot of these kids? That's a
Well, you know, Detlef brought up a great point. I asked that question to Detlef, and he said, well, the kids that left the UW basketball team, they couldn't break the starting five, and they all want to play in the NBA. Do you think if you can't start here, you're going to go somewhere else and try getting in the NBA, right? How many players are there?
exactly. There's
So
very
if you
few.
can't make it at the UW, if you can't start amongst that school and you want to transfer somewhere, it's really kind of a waste of time.
Yeah, I'm kind of a pro freedom of movement guy in terms of players, because administrators can transfer, coaches can take new jobs, but that's we can go deeper on that maybe some other time.
Well,
Go ahead.
In my living room and you say, come play for me at the University of Washington, and you shake my parents' hand and you break bread with my family, and we come to Seattle and play for you, and you're off to USC the next year because you got 10 million or 20 million. That's not right. The player should be able to transfer also.
Right. No, I think your point's valid. Putting on a legal hat for a second, I thought that was an interesting Supreme Court case that came down last year, where the court ruled that college basically cannot limit educational benefits. They have discretion defining educational benefits, but they can't limit them. But I don't want to get your opinion on this, Jimmy. An explosive part of that case was Kavanaugh's concurring opinion. He thinks all financial restrictions on college athletes should be banned and violate antitrust law. Where Kavanaugh went in his concurring opinion, let's watch for that. Anyhow, what's your take on Kavanaugh's take?
I don't really have a take on it. I don't waste any time on it. I don't mean to be disrespectful to your question, but I can't make a difference there. Therefore, I don't really think much about it.
I understand.
Something if you do want to put on your legal hat, something I was hoping to accomplish and I failed was I wanted to get insurance for ball players over a certain age that weren't properly insured for the CTE. And we have a couple of guys out there that are it's extremely sad what's going on. I was also hoping with the Downtown Dawgs to make sure that student athletes get proper representation, independent representation from lawyers like yourself. Because, for example, I signed a waiver, 21 years old, and I signed a waiver with a certain team. And it was right before I was going to run the 40-yard dash and do the bench press test. And, you're pumped up to get out there and do your best. I don't know what I signed. No idea. So there's been some cases, and I'm not going to get into names and exact people, but those were the two things that I was hoping to make a difference with my show. And it kind of fell by the wayside because nobody wants to talk about it. Independent insurance for student athletes or kids up to a certain age, and then insurance for ball players that have obvious football injuries. I know CTE can't be detected until the player's dead and you can get their brain. But there should be insurance for these kids that have injuries from football that are not properly insured. So
I couldn't agree more. And I want to tell you a concept that's come up on my show. I've talked to a couple of guests about. I may even go even further than you, Jimmy. I support a workers' compensation type system where injured athletes can be protected as if they're on the job. If somebody's on the job and as a steel worker, he or she is injured, they can receive lifelong workers' compensation protections. I think student athletes who are injured should have a workers' compensation type program. Anyhow.
Absolutely. There you go. I'll talk about that all day.
Right. Jimmy, it's just amazing what you're doing with your show, and you're interviewing all these Husky legends. I mean, Warren Moon, Kurt Marsh, the list goes on. And you're unique because you played with a lot of these people. You're a Husky Hall of Fame guy yourself. You played Husky football. But what are some interesting things you've learned about some of these people that you did not know before, that you've learned interviewing them on your show?
Some of the people that you expect to just be a 5-star interview, like I'm sure you were expecting from me today.
Oh, you've been great.
Turn out to be lead balloons. So there were a few people, and I'm not going to mention names. I'm like, I couldn't wait, and I had so much in common, and I knew so much about their background, and I couldn't believe they were coming on the show. And the show was over, and I looked at my videographer and editor, Jeffrey Lancaster, and we just said, "What was that?" And I thought it was me, right? I thought I did a horrible job interviewing, and he goes, "No, it was a dead end. It was a dead end everywhere you went." And then there were people like But Chuck Armstrong, I felt like I was sitting with my dad, and I could have talked to him for hours. And we're friends now. We go and have a coffee and donut, once a month.
Great.
So there's that. The one thing about Warren Moon that really stood out was when this guy got out of the car, you knew he was all of that. You knew he was an all-pro. I mean, he just had the presence, the physicality. Everything about Warren Moon was everything you read. It was for real. When you shake his hand, you know you're shaking the hand of an all-pro. Now, Tom Flick, who I love and adore, and he's one of my heroes, he's slight, $180, $170, whatever, 6'1". And not that Warren's like 6'5", 280 or anything. It was just his presence. And then the other thing that you'll enjoy, Paul, was I think you can tell a lot about a person by his wiffle ball swing. So we played wiffle ball on the parking lot quite a bit. And Warren Moon was just smooth. And then Bruce Harrell, our new mayor, he had the most violent wiffle ball swing I've ever seen.
I know. I saw that. Bruce had a good swing. I saw that. Yeah. Yeah.
It was impressive.
I watched that. But you've been great today, Jimmy. I like how you were blunt with me. Paul, with Kavanaugh's concurring opinion. Sorry, it's not my thing, but you've great insights. Great. I got a kick out of your response to my little Brett Kavanaugh opinion, but great stuff today. I want to share a Warren Moon story and a Mark Stewart story with you and the listeners right now that I haven't mentioned. My late grandpa was a Husky football player, and he led her in 1928, Harry Schneiderman. So he's one of your deceased Husky football letterman, my late grandpa. And my grandpa in the early 80s was in his late 70s then, not young. And he was at the Elikai Hotel when the Pro Bowl was going on in Honolulu. You'll love this story, Jimmy. So my grandpa, an old school Husky, walks up to Warren Moon and Mark Stewart. And he said those guys were incredibly decent. They invited my grandpa up to their hotel room just to hang out and talk Husky football. So if I ever meet Warren Moon and Mark Stewart, I want to share that story with them. Here they are, these studly guys in like their late 20s, late 30s, ever. And this older Husky who just walks up to say hello, and they just could not have been more gracious to him. I mean, I just love how they invite my grandpa up to their room to hang out for a while.
Yeah,
so,
and that goes back to Willie Mays, in my opinion. So if somebody ever asked me for an autograph, are you kidding? You want my autograph? You just made my day, right? Every once in a while, I'll get somebody to send me a Husky card to sign and send back to them. I can't sign it and get it back to them fast enough.
Love it.
Such an honor. Then you hear stories about Mickey Mantle back in the day. People would approach him at a restaurant after a game and say, "Hey, Mickey, do you mind if I get an autograph?" And he would say, "Well, why don't you come join us for a drink?" And I went to a great haunt down in Hollywood was Dan Tana's, one of the greatest restaurant bars of all time. And Magic Johnson would frequent. And I saw some people go over to Magic's table, and he said something to them, and then they came back, and their table was closer to mine. And 15 minutes later, Magic came up and sat down with them for 30 minutes. And they were folks from Michigan. And I just listened to them talk. And it was just, and I think that, I don't know if it's missing out there, but I could tell you another story when I was in Chicago and the Yankees were in town. And some kid there's a bunch of people in the lobby with baseballs and pins and t-shirts to get autographed. And I was staying in the hotel that day. And I asked the kid, I said, "Whose autograph do you want?" He said, "No, Alex Rodriguez." And no, it was Derek Jeter. He wanted Derek Jeter's. And I got in the elevator and I didn't realize, I looked over and there was A-Rod. So I'm in the elevator with A-Rod and he was with Cameron Diaz, the actress, right? And I thought, well, I'll just get, whatever autograph I can for this kid. And I had a baseball and a pin. And I said, "Hey, A-Rod, I'm a Seattle guy. I was a fan of his when he first started out with the Mariners." And I said, "A-Rod, could you sign this for a kid downstairs?" And it was a pretty small elevator, Paul. And, and I was 250-ish. I had a little bit of girth to me, and I wasn't intimidated by him by any means, but he kind of looked the other way. And instead of saying, "No, I can't," or "No, I won't." And then, so I kind of moved over and got in front of him. And I said, "Can you sign this baseball, jackass? That's what I'm thinking." And Cameron Diaz looked at me like, gave me this, like, no, he can't sign baseballs. And I'm just like, what the hell's wrong?
A-Rod wouldn't sign it for you?
Wouldn't sign it for him.
That's not nice. That's
Yeah.
not nice.
Not
I was prepared to hear a good story about A-Rod. I'm disappointed. I was
sorry. Now, if you want to hear the best part of the story was Cameron Diaz, because suddenly, forget A-Rod, right? You're in the elevator with Cameron Diaz, and she looked very beautiful.
I bet. Pretty lady.
Yeah. Very pretty.
Yeah, no doubt. She doesn't hurt the eye at all. But that means a lot when you think of Warren Moon and some of the people you mentioned. I met Roger Maris once when I was a kid in Sun Valley when I was like 14 years old, and he could not have been warmer and kinder when he signed an autograph for me. Just that extra minute or two he spent. Well, son, what are you up to? You know, he was so sweet. You never forget that rest of your life. You know, when someone is just gives a little extra kindness. You know,
Absolutely.
So. Well, Jimmy, I'm going to get two more questions in with you, and I would love to do this again with you another time. Here's another Schneiderman question I've been asking to guests the last several months. If you had to pick one sports movie, what's your favorite?
Bryan song.
Great one.
No doubt. Gale Sayers and Brian Piccolo. Oh, I challenge you to watch that movie and don't tear up.
Seen it. It's amazing. And I'm trying to get James Caan on my show, by the way. I don't know if I ever will, but I'm trying to get him on my show.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear him talk about his role in that movie and about rollerball. Okay, he has a little sports side to him. So
yeah. Billy D. Williams.
Billy D. Williams. Yeah, he'd be great to have on too. But that great movie, that's one of my favorites. And that movie's come up with some, I guess, is among my favorites.
Probably the second one for me would be Heaven Can Wait.
What's that, Jimmy?
Heaven Can Wait would probably be my second one.
That's a good one. Dave Craig mentioned that as his favorite sports movie.
Yeah, that one really got me because
that's a good one.
I remember watching back in the 70s. I watched Dallas, and I think the Raiders were in the Super Bowl, and these guys came out for the coin toss, and it was like one of the greatest moments of my life. And I thought, I'm going to be a captain in a Super Bowl, and I'm going to come out for a coin toss. Didn't quite make it, but got to the Orange Bowl.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, Jimmy, I want to throw a plug for a movie, and this is not a high profile movie, but it's come to my show. It took place at my alma mater, Roosevelt High School in Seattle. There's a great documentary about the Roosevelt women's basketball team called The Heart of the Game. Came out about 2006. Not a high profile sports movie, but a very well done movie. I'd highly recommend you watch it. The Heart of the Game. I think you'd enjoy it. So, Jimmy, you've lived all over the world, and I get you back someday. We're going to talk more about your international travels and so forth. You lived in Istanbul, I believe. You lived in South Africa. And you mentioned, I believe, in an interview, or there was something that came up recently where you stated that Seattle is your favorite city in the world. Why is Seattle your favorite city in the world?
Just look around. You've got the water, you've got the seafood, you've got the Seattle Art Museum right there, the bubblegum wall. And did I mention the water? I mean, it's just a gorgeous city. And now when they finish up this waterfront, which is completed from Western and Alaskan Way, it's completed all the way up to Seneca now. It's dynamite. People are going to be coming from all over the world, and that's my backyard, by the way.
Amazing.
So it's just beautiful. It is definitely one of my favorite cities. And now we got the right mayor in place, and I cannot tell you how much things have cleaned up in 1 month. I'm not kidding you, and maybe it's just the visibility of the police. But I know we got issues still, and I know we got a lot of work to do, but the jerk offs are gone. The drug dealers are gone, and hopefully they'll stay away. And maybe it's just my little sweet spot here in First and Seneca and Pike and Pine in between First and Third. But my bellwether was Target, the Target store, because that's the only place that has food, groceries downtown and electronics. And people were walking in and stealing less than $800. They knew they wouldn't be prosecuted. Now you walk in, you see a policeman on the third floor, you see a policeman on the second floor. And not only does that stop people, just the visibility of a policeman with a gun, but the security people that are hired get more confidence because they know they have a policeman. And then there's also what they call the downtown ambassadors that are hired by the local restaurants downtown. They get more confidence because they know they have some policemen around. So I'm saying bring more properly trained policemen to downtown Seattle. We've got the summer coming up. It's going to be a wonderful summer. Like I said, Goldman Sachs in Wall Street terms put a strong buy on Seattle.
And that you bring up a lot there. And I'm totally rooting for Mayor Harrell to do a good job. I think I'm feeling a little more optimism recently. And your point on Goldman Sachs coming, I mentioned that or being here, that having a major company come here is a sign that I think Seattle is still alive, and there's a lot ahead here. We have, stuff to work on, as you mentioned, but I think there's a lot there. Well, Jimmy, I really enjoyed you coming on the 113th edition of the Sports Untold podcast, also on Rainier Avenue Radio. Great time, great to meet, and you and I will definitely still be in touch.
Sounds great, Paul. Congratulations on 113.
Well, going to try to keep chugging away. So it's been fun, and I wish you the best of your podcast. We'll be in touch.
All right.
Thank you so much. You take care.